Look at that thing. It's like a castle. The Springfield Armory was built in 1895. Dr. Seuss was born across the street. Castle-like facade was thought to have been an inspiration for many of the buildings in his books. Huh.
Some of you poker players who reside on the eastern portion of the United States of America will already know that that armory is a part of the MGM Springfield Casino. Said casino is the location of yesterday's and today's meetup game. Yesterday and today, this event is the first time that a fully sanctioned and fully unique, fully independent. This is an official event. This is a proper meetup game, and we have cracked the nut. We have officially cracked the nut that is the MGM Corporation. Two dudes with YouTube channels hosting an event in an MGM poker room. Right, so as mentioned, today is day 2. Today is Wednesday. It is about 3:35 in the PM. Event doesn't officially get kicked off until 5 p.m. today. Yesterday was the first day of the event. We're doing 2 days of 2-5 at No Limit Texas Hold'em. Same thing both days, officially starting at 5 p.m., but there's already something like 7 games going, and it's only 3:35 in the PM. So let's, before we get into today, recap yesterday, and I've got hands for you poker hand fanatic freak poker people. Right, so very early on, a couple of limps. We're at the first table here. There's a couple limps. We look down at King 10 offsuit. Seems playable in late position at a meetup game. $30 to go. We see 4 callers, and we see a pretty favorable flop for the King 10. We see a King 10 high board. King 10-7 with a flush draw. Checks over to me. Gonna see bet it. Gonna size up here with all the hands that could potentially continue. About 120 or 125, and surprisingly, everybody folds. Shortly after that, we have our first bomb pot of the evening. Once again, a favorable flop, finding a top 2 pair again. This time we have ace-queen offsuit. There's a bet of $80 before it gets to us. I think with the flush draw on there, gutter balls and such, just gonna go ahead and raise this one for value right away. I make it 260, I believe, 260 to go. So once again, no further action beyond the flop. Yeah, see, you just ask and you get not too bad. In the games here at MGM Springfield, you can straddle from any position. And in this game, there's a $10 straddle in middle position. There's a late position limp, and we look at Queen Jack suited in the small blind, I believe. Could potentially raise it here and try and take down the blinds with a playable hand. But I decide to limp being out of position. The big blind, however, raises it up to $40. There's 2 calls, and we have a pretty standard call here. Flop comes down at King Jack 6 rainbow. I check, and the action checks all the way through. Turn is a 9 in diamonds, and we could consider betting here, but I decide to check it with middle pair. The pre-flop raiser puts in a bet this time, and he bets 100 even. Folds over to me with middle pair plus a gutter ball. I'm gonna go ahead and make the call here. The river's a brick. It's an offsuit 3, so nothing changes. There's lots of potential drawing hands that could have fired on the turn. And once my opponent bets $300, it's a pretty interesting spot. We do block straights, we don't block flush draws, and we block some strong hands with middle pair. I'm pretty tempted to go back into my old ways here and find a call, and I don't think it would be that bad of a call. I don't think it would be the craziest call that I've made by any stretch. You would expect my opponent to bet his stronger hands on the flop, considering there was 3 opponents. I wouldn't expect him to be slow playing too many hands, and there's not that many combos of strong hands on the flop anyway. But in the end, it feels a little weird, and it feels a little bit too light to make the call down here, so I go ahead and let it go. My opponent asks if we want to see. I don't know if I want to see. I've been shown some bluffs lately, so I let him decide whether he wants to show or not.
You want me to show it or no?
It's your choice.
That's what you want.
He shows us one card, which is a 9. So that is actually one of the hands that I was concerned about, which is pocket 9s. That hand can easily fit the bill here, raising pre-flop and not continuing until he makes a set on the turn. And later on, he does tell me that he has a set, and not only that, but other players at the table confirm that is what he had. They saw his hand. In this next hand, the $10 straddle is on, I believe, under the gun. There is a raise to $30, and there are several calls before the button puts in a 3-bet. Button raises it up to $140 before we look down at ace-king offsuit in the small blind. So pretty interesting spot here. I have seen what looks like a couple of squeeze spots happening at this table, although it didn't get to showdown, so I can't be certain. But this looks like another one of those squeeze spots. After there's a raise and several callers, the player on the button can definitely be putting in a 3-bet bluff, trying to squeeze this dead money, and usually only has to get through the initial raiser. So when we look down at ace-king, I think we have a very straightforward 4-bet here. We're just gonna have to go with it if we do face a 5-bet jam. We are raising for value here, and I think that is the Maybe not standard, but I think that's going to be the play here, especially in a meetup game. So I am going to put in the 4-bet here. I choose a sizing of $365. Again, we're just going to have to go with it. Stacks are not incredibly deep. I do have the button covered, and I think he's somewhere around 900 effective at the start of this hand. So action folds back to the player on the button. He thinks for a little while before
All in.
jamming all of his $900-ish into the middle. So we don't have too much thought here. I was raising for value, not raising to go ahead and fold to a 5-bet, not turning this hand into a bluff. I'm going to have to call it off here. We are going to be dominated sometimes. We're going to be crushed sometimes by pocket aces. We'll have 30% versus pocket kings. And we'll be flipping with a lot of other hands.
All right. I have no pair.
So I make the call, we run out the board, and it turns out we do not improve. Usually, at best, we're looking for a chopping situation here, but my opponent delivers us even better news. He says we're good.
You got it.
My opponent rolls over the ace-5 of spades for pretty sick play, pretty gangster play, I must say. There's going to be a lot of times where I have hands like ace-queen, offsuit or suited, or even a hand like his, ace-5, ace-4, ace-3 suited, something like that, where I'm going to be putting in the re-bluff, the 4-bet bluff, going after what looks like a squeeze play. He's definitely going to win that hand sometimes, both pre-flop and post-flop, so I got to give it up. I like the jam there. I don't think it's the worst play by any stretch. Of course, like to see the action, and very happy to win with ace-king high in the biggest pot of the game so far. All right, moving through the tables here, at a new table, at a fresh table. Don't have any reads on any of these players, as tends to happen as I'm moving around the room. In this hand, there's no straddle on, and there's an early position raise to $20. We look down at pocket deuces, make the call. There's 2 calls behind me, so we go 4 ways to a flop, in which we flop ourselves bottom set, jack, 8, deuce with a flush draw. Action checks over to me. I bet $35, which I think is a little bit too small. I think we can bet bigger since we can get action from flush draws, straight draws, top pairs, second pairs, all sorts of things. So I think that's a little bit too small of a bet size, but 35 it is. The 2 players behind me make the call. So 3 ways to a turn card, which is an offsuit king. This time, the first player to act leads out. He bets $110. So I feel like I pretty much always have the best hand here in this spot. I feel like if he had pocket 8s, we would very often see a raise on that flop, considering I bet pretty small and it's pretty draw heavy. No reason to think he would ever have pocket kings here. So I'm going to put in a raise and charge diamond draws in particular. I make it $335 to go. Player on my left folds before the player who led out on that turn card, he makes the call. So heads up to a river card, which is a terrible card. It's the 10 of diamonds. So the most obvious draw comes in there on the river. A very ugly card. We don't block anything. We don't block any flush draws or straight draws, of course. Certainly hands of both types could have come in on this river, and it's not great when we see my opponent put out a bet. I'm not even sure what the bet size is. Probably just a little bit frustrated with that diamond on the river. I don't wait for a count, and I just go ahead and muck my hand, after which my opponent very proudly shows us the 4 deuce offsuit. Not only that, but we get a little show in our faces from a guy who goes by the name of Cookie or Cookie Monster or something of the sort.
All right, time for Cookie Monster poker. I've been waiting.
So, action is to be found here at MGM Springfield, especially in a meetup game. And once again, I get bluffed out of my shoes. So, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm thinking. By folding a set and not even waiting for the count. I guess like I said, I just need to be closing my eyes and calling. I thought I gave up a bad habit when I stopped calling rivers quite so frequently. And now I'm starting to think that was a big mistake by giving up that habit. I think I just need to be calling all rivers all the time, never folding ever again in my life. All right, anyway, one more hand from yesterday. New table, not any reads. Don't really know what's going on as I move around the tables. $10 straddle is on in this hand. That straddle is in middle position, and the player directly to his left raises it up to $30. The player in the big blind calls before we look down at pocket kings. So definitely a 3-bet spot here. Being out of position versus the initial raiser and maybe a little bit on the deeper side, I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet this up to $150. The straddler folds, the initial raiser folds. The player in the big blind thinks for a little while before deciding he wants to continue. He makes the call. So we're going heads up to a flop here, which comes down Jack 10 something. Jack 10 deuce with 2 spades. He checks it over to me, and my opponent only has $450 here. So with the $150 3 bets, that's 300 plus the initial raise of 30, that's 330 plus the $10 straddle. So he's got maybe 1.25 to 1 stack to pot ratio. If I have a hand like ace king or something of the sort, then I'm going to want to get all the money in here and put the maximum pressure on, presumably with some outs. So I think it makes sense to just go ahead and rip it all in here with the value hands as well.
All in.
Jam it all in there with the pocket kings, and unfortunately my opponent snap calls, insta call. So it doesn't look too good. The cards run out. 4 spades on the board, gets even worse, more ugly. It doesn't really matter though because my opponent has pocket tens. So some run bad there at the end of the night. Pocket kings go down in flames, also get bluffed out of our shoes. We were up a bunch with that ace king versus ace 5 hand, but not to be towards the end of the night. We do book a win at the end of the night. We were in for $1,000 and we cashed out a profit of $150 or something like that. Maybe 180, I think, 180 bucks. So that's just day one. We got a whole nother day of meetup game action. We had 14 tables yesterday in the MGM Springfield poker room. We'll see how many we get today. If it's anywhere near that amount, I'll be thrilled, and if it's anywhere near the amount of action that we saw yesterday, that'll be great too. So we'll see what happens. Off to go play poker and probably maybe try to not get bluffed out of my
The action kicks off pretty fast and furious here in day 2 in MGM Springfield. In this hand, the straddle is on and there is an early position raise to $30 before we look down at pocket tens. Gonna go ahead and flat call here facing the raise from early position. There's 2 more calls behind me, so 4 ways to a flop. I got my favorable hoodie on. Things are looking nice. 10-6-5 with 2 diamonds, flopping the nuts here. The initial raiser puts out a bet, always good to see. Bets out $65. So it's a debate between flat calling and putting in a raise. I think it's gonna look super strong here, putting in a raise right off the bat, especially with 2 players behind me to act. So blocking a lot of the continuing range. Granted, it is a bit draw heavy, flush draws and straight draws available. I'm just gonna go ahead and flat call here. I'm gonna take my chances. Don't want to over up my hand right away in early position. I flat call and both of the players behind me flat call as well. So it is a little bit risky here, looking for a safe turn card. It's a offsuit king. Initial raiser agrees that this is a pretty safe card. He bets again, this time to the tune of $250. So I have a slight debate, but maybe not really. Again, debating between flat calling and going ahead and jamming with those 2 players behind me calling on the flop. I think we're actually gonna have a pretty straightforward jam here. I don't wanna give too good of a price to any more flush draws, straight draws, combo draws. So after counting down my stack, making it look like I have a little bit of a decision, I count out the 250-ish, whatever it was, and it turns out I have about $400 more in my stack. So with those stack sizes, I think we have a pretty clear jam situation.
Come on.
I ship all the chips into the pots, raise all in. The players behind me, they fold pretty quickly, and the initial raiser has himself a decision. He does not snap call, so that means he does not have pocket kings, but he is going into the tank here. Doing some math here in this situation, and he eventually decides on a call. So we are off to see 1 more card. The river is an offsuit jack. I show it down, and my opponent cannot beat that hand. He sends his cards into the muck, and very early on in day 2 of the meetup game, we're scooping up a pretty big pot here. Later on, we chatted about it a little bit, and I assumed that he did have himself top pair with diamonds to go along with it. Turns out that was the case when he told me that he had king queen of diamonds. So situation that he pretty much can't get away from with these stack sizes and all that extra money that was put into the pot from the other 2 players as well. So can't blame him too much. We end up on the good side of a cooler in the early going. In this next hand, we have ourselves Jack 10 of clubs on the button following an early position raise, I believe, from under the gun. 4 ways to a flop, which comes down ace high with 2 clubs. Action checks over to me, could potentially bet it. We are facing 3 opponents. Usually when it's multi-way like that, I'm just gonna go ahead and play pretty straightforward here. So I check it back. The turn brings another club, and it also pairs the ace. This time the initial raiser leads out for $50, folds over to me. I'm just gonna go ahead and flat call here, see what develops on the river. see what sizing he chooses and debates between flatting and raising. River comes in offsuit 7, and the sizing that he chooses is $125. So that feels a little bit on the smaller side compared to this pot. Not exactly a polarizing size, and I think I want to try and squeeze out some value here. We have ourselves a jack high flush, and we blocked a 10 high flush, so it could be a little bit tough to get too much value, and it could be kind of thin. But facing that sizing, I still want to try it. I want to try and squeeze out a little bit more value. And I put in a raise. I raise it up to $355 altogether. My opponent thinks for a little while. Seems like he has himself potentially an ace, maybe a weak one, but also some under pairs. Hands such as 9s, 8s, things like that. He's not really, if he does happen to have one of those hands, it's gonna be kind of a tough call. So like I said, the value could be a little bit thin in this spot, and my opponent's does go ahead and fold. So turns out there's not any more value there, and I'm not sure it's the greatest raise on the river. At least we know we did have the best hand. Then again, that's only part of the equation. The other part is what can we get called by? Maybe I should be raising slightly smaller. Maybe I should just go for the min raise, try and get a crying call from some hands, but as it is, no more value to be found. We do scoop it in though. In this next hand, we see an under the gun limp before my buddy Trevor Savage of Raising the Nuts fame puts in a raise on the button. He makes it $25 to go. We are here in the small blind, looking down at ace 10 suited. So Trevor Savage, very crafty player, fantastic player, but this ace 10 suited is definitely going to be ahead of his button raising range following an under the gun limp. So 3-bet time, I make it $100 to go. The big blind cold calls. The under the gun limper folds, and Trevor's not going anywhere. He wants to see himself a flop. So the three of us heading to see a flop, which comes down to ace high. So in an interesting spot here, obviously the ace high flop is good for the 3-betters range. However, we do have that cold caller in there, so maybe slightly neutral. I think often the cold call is going to signify a hand such as 9s, 10s, jacks, something like that. Medium pair-ish, a hand where he's not going to want to go ahead and put in a 4-bet. He wants to see a flop, but too strong to fold. So sort of in that medium-ish range. Trevor, well, he's Trevor Savage. He could be all over the place. Who knows what the hell he has at any time. I'm gonna go ahead and try and pot control this. I'm gonna start with a check here. Happy to continue facing bets, but don't want to bloat this pot too big in case we are up against a better hand. I check it, the big blind checks, and Trevor decides he wants to bet. $125 from him. Very straightforward call from us, and the big blind folds. The turn is an offsuit jack. I'm gonna stay in flow here. I check it again, and this time Trevor checks it back. River's a brick and doesn't change anything. I'm not too sure if we can go for some small value here. Maybe it's a possibility, but I find it possibly difficult to get called from too much worse. Maybe from worse aces we could potentially get called by, but I decide on a check in the moment, and Trevor checks it back. We show it down, we win the pot. Things are going great at the meetup game. Trevor tells me he almost got there, so maybe he had a jack and maybe he had a flush draw, or who knows what Trevor has at any one point in time. I do know that we have ourselves a pair of aces with a 10 kicker, and that's good enough for the pot. In this next hand, no straddle is on. We look down at 2 red 9s, raising it up to $20 from early position. There's one call in late position, and the big blind closes the action with another call. So 3 ways to a flop in which we flop ourselves an overpair on 7-4 deuce rainbow. Big blind checks, standard c-bet from us, $30, half pot. The late position player calls, and the big blind puts in a raise. He makes it $130. Even $100 more. Don't love to see it, but don't think that we can just go ahead and fold an overpair in this spot. So I go ahead and call, and the player in late position folds it. Turn is the king of hearts, which adds a backdoor flush draw on the board. Somewhat interesting of a card. Should usually be better from my range, this king, because I should have the overpairs such as pocket kings, giving us top set more often. My opponent in the big blind doesn't care one bit. He goes ahead and fires an additional $300 here on the turn. It's getting a little bit sketchy. We do have a 9 in our hand, so that blocks some backdoor flush draw potential, such as a hand like 9-8 of hearts, something like that. 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw and backdoor straight draw type thing. Not sure if this particular player or any player in the average 2-5 player pool is going to be getting that out of line and that creative. I don't know. I'm not in the most fold happy mood, especially after I got bluffed out of my shoes for multiple videos in a row now. Also got shown a Cookie Monster t-shirt, so that's definitely in the back of my head. There are some drawing hands available on this flop, mostly straight draws, some backdoor flush draws. Just like I said, not in a folding mood. So $300, yeah. I came here to play. I call. The river is a pretty good card for us. It's a deuce, so it pairs the board. That eliminates some of the value hands that he could have on the flop. That is going to weight his check raising range on the flop more towards the drawing hands and more towards the bluffs. My opponent doesn't seem to care though. He's emptying the clip the full amount.
All in over here.
How much? $870 all in. We've got ourselves a little bit of a decision now. What to do, what to do. We've come this far. We don't block any of those drawing hands. We don't block a single drawing hand with our pocket nines. Granted, we do block some backdoor heart draws, but we don't block any straight draws. We didn't come all the way to MGM Springfield to fold pocket nines on a king high board, apparently. I don't know. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna get a little bit curious here. I'm gonna toss it in. We're gonna have to see what we're up against. I toss in the call.
And a call.
And my opponent shows us 6-5 offsuit.
There. Nines and deuces over there. Nines and deuces. There.
We did it. I'm sorry. It's not my fault. Blame the Cookie Monster, you know? We get one to work. I told you, I've given up folding. I'm not gonna be folding at meetup games anymore. I had a little bit of a stretch where I decided to dabble in folding. I've given it up. New year, new me. Same as the old me. No more folding. We're calling rivers. We're winning this pot. Things seem to be going extremely well in this meetup game thus far. Moving around the tables, making our way through. Somebody gave me a batch of coffee. It's got some favorable branding on it. Somebody gave me a couple packs of beer. We have an amazing turnout here. We've got somewhere around 12 games going, and the entire room is full. There's action to be found here at MGM Springfield. There's straddles happening. There are some familiar faces in the room. And speaking of, in this hand, Michael Ian Black opens this hand for $20. He's in early position with that raise, and we look down at ace, queen of hearts on the button. I'm gonna go ahead and flat call here. I could definitely 3-bet in some situations, but facing an early position raise, flatting seems perfectly normal. The flop comes down ace king high with 2 spades, and he checks it over to me. So I'm definitely gonna bet this. I'm gonna bet it for value, and I'm gonna down bet it like I might do if I was the initial raiser on this type of a board. I bet $15. Michael disagrees. He doesn't think that's nearly enough money. He raises it up to $60. So now I'm kicking myself a little bit because we could get ourselves into a little bit of trouble. If we induced him into that check raise, but it turns out that he has the best hand, it's gonna be very tough to us to fold here. I mean, we have ourselves ace queen after all. Obviously we cannot fold at this point, so I go ahead and toss in the $60. Turn is the 4 of clubs, which adds a second flush draw on the board. This time he fires out to the tune of $110. I don't think we have too much choice here. I think we still have to continue, and we're gonna have to evaluate some river cards. I'm gonna go ahead and toss in the 110. The river is an interesting card. It's the queen of spades, so it completes the front door flush. He checks it over to me, so pretty interesting spot, which I don't think changes too much. I think he's still gonna have hands that are better than ours sometimes, and he's going to have hands in which we might have induced a raise with, since we bet so small on the flop. I don't know if we can get value from worse in this too often, since the front door flush did come in. He's still gonna have aces, he's gonna have kings, ace king. He'll even have a flush sometimes now. I don't know how often it's going to be worth the value bet. Maybe it is, maybe it's worth a small one, but I decide to check it down, play it safe, and see what's happening here. My opponent shows us the ace 10. So good news, we had the best hand all along. Maybe there would have been more value to extract on a different river or a different queen, but happy to go ahead and take this one down.
Yep.
In this next hand, once again, Michael Ian Black raises up to $20, and we look down at ace king offsuit on the button. Gonna go ahead and 3-bet it up to $70. He makes the call, and we are heads up to a flop which comes down jack 10-5 with 2 diamonds. I don't have any diamonds on my hand, which I would definitely prefer, but I feel like it's okay to go ahead and fire anyway. 2 high cards on the flop. I bet out for $80, and unfortunately we do not win the pot here. He makes the call. Turn is an offsuit 7, which I don't think is a very good card for our range, probably better for his. He checks it. I'm just gonna go ahead and check it back and try to improve on the river, which we do not. The river's another jack. He checks it over to us. I don't think we're gonna have a jack here too often after checking back on the turn. So actually goes check check on the river, and my opponent shows us queen 10 of clubs for flop to second pair, good kicker. And I don't know, perhaps we might have been able to win that with further aggression there on the turn, but like I said, not the best turn card for our range. So 1 for me, 1 for him, seems fair. Moving on to the next table, in which we got into a major confrontation, a major cooler. I didn't have the camera rolling because it didn't seem like anything was gonna happen when I defended the big blind with queen 6 of clubs going 3 ways. Flop comes down with 2 queens. The turn is a 6, so we make a full house versus my buddy Brian Stafford on the button. has himself the ace queen, so we get there on the turn and we win ourselves a very, very sizable pot with that cooler situation. My apologies. Brian Stafford, the mug MVP, who travels to many a meetup game and is our designated friendly face at all of these meetup games. My love goes out to you. My heart goes out to you. I'm sorry, Brian Stafford. Please forgive me for the ridiculousness of the queen six versus your ace queen. Anyway, massive success here at MGM. That's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up for day 2 here. Get into the game for an even $1,000. Cash out of the game for $4,400 and something. I don't know, like 44, 30, something like that. Profit of $3,400 and something. Good day here at MGM Springfield. Ran fantastic. Made a good call or two, and things fell into place here on day 2. So we're gonna show a profit over the 2 days and a great turnout here at MGM. This was a momentous day. Like I said, we officially breached the walls, the corporate walls of the MGM Corporation. Great to officially do a meetup game here. We will be coming back here probably 2 more times this year, and hopefully if we get anywhere near this size of a turnout again, I'll be very happy. The first day I think we had 14 2-5 meetup games going on. Second day I think we had 12, but we had every table in this poker room utilized. The tables were full, the poker room was full. This was on a Tuesday and Wednesday, so pretty stoked about that. You know, once you decide to stop folding, once you decide to stop getting bluffed out of your shoes, easy game.